What's going on? It's TokyoTron, and One Piece chapter 1000 is quickly approaching us. 1000 chapters is a milestone that doesn't happen a lot in manga, or even any other form of fiction. Unlike most other works, One Piece has had significant story developments at each milestone. So before I get into the 5 things most likely to happen in chapter 1000, I'll briefly go over what's happened at each milestone so far. In chapter 100, Sea Prism Stone got revealed, and more importantly, Dragon was introduced to the story and saved Luffy. And even more importantly than that, the Straw Hats also enter the Grand Line and officially start on their big journey this chapter. Chapter 200 is reaching the climax of the Alabasta arc, where Luffy finally starts to get the upper hand on Crocodile using his water punches, and this is also when Vivi and the rest of the Straw Hats are trying to get rid of the bomb. Chapter 300 is the big celebration at the end of the Skypiea arc, with everyone dancing around the bonfire after Enel got defeated and Skypiea was saved. Chapter 400 was when the Straw Hats got the resolve to go save Robin, and they determined that they just need to get keys from defeating each member of CP9 so they can save Robin. Chapter 500 is the introduction of Rayleigh and the reveal of the long-standing racism against fishmen in the One Piece universe. Chapter 600 is when all the Straw Hats come back to Sabaody Archipelago, reuniting after Marineford and Impel Down. Chapter 700 is when the Straw Hats set their sights on Dressrosa and start traveling there after the first 2 arcs of the post-time skip. Chapter 800 is when the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is formed and all of Luffy's followers exchange sake cups. And finally, chapter 900 is the Bad End musical, where Big Mom's rampage finally ends and she starts singing as the Straw Hats escape. And with all of the milestones so far, you've most likely seen a trend just like I have, as these milestones normally serve as a very important and pivotal part in the arc, meaning that it's either a time where the climax of an arc is happening or starts, or it could also be a time where the arc is concluding. Unlike most of those other times, chapter 1000 doesn't seem like it's gonna be the end of Wano, because we still have Act 4 and Act 5, and we probably have around 1 or 2 more years in Wano before the arc is over. So after going through all of the milestones, that finally brings us to chapter 1000. And as chapter 1000 is the one milestone that hasn't actually happened yet, here are the top 5 things most likely to happen in chapter 1000. Number 5 is Big Mom vs. Kaido Part 2. Now, this might seem crazy at first, but in chapter 996, Big Mom essentially ensured that she had a plan to deal with Kaido. She also heavily implied that the alliance with Kaido was only temporary and that she would still become the king of the pirates and that Perospero had to trust her judgment. Now, we don't exactly know when or how Big Mom is planning to achieve her goal, but it's very apparent that she will betray Kaido at some point in the story. And the last we saw of Big Mom, she's flying up to the top of Onigashima in a hurry, and we don't know why. Logically, there could only be one of 2 reasons as to why she would do this. The first is that she might have something very important to say to Kaido, which could escalate into a fight, or she's straight up trying to fight Kaido off rip, which would obviously escalate into a much bigger battle. And for these reasons, I think Big Mom vs. Kaido Part 2 could happen in chapter 1000, but even as I say that, it's still the most unlikely in the list of this top 5. Number 4 is the arrival of the Big Mom pirates, and more importantly, Katakuri. So it's pretty obvious to everyone that the Big Mom pirates will enter the battle eventually. But not many people think that Katakuri can show up since he wasn't on the ship originally. So obviously I think the Big Mom pirates will show up, but I also think that somewhere near the end of the chapter we could get a panel of Katakuri's boots stepping out of a mirror after Brûlé sends him to Wano through her mirror world. And if Katakuri actually shows up in Wano along with the rest of the Big Mom crew, if they don't immediately betray Kaido, it's pretty much wraps for the Straw Hat Pirates as of now. It's not looking really likely that they're going to be able to defeat one Yonko crew, but if they have another Yonko crew, especially with Katakuri there who Luffy was barely able to defeat, and arguably who is still around the same level as Luffy, the Straw Hat Alliance will have absolutely no chance in winning this war. And if the Big Mom pirates were to arrive at chapter 1000, this basically confirms that the raid on Onigashima will end in failure, pretty much putting an end to Act 3, so we'll have to see what the Straw Hats can do to combat the Beast Pirates and now the Big Mom Pirates in Act 4 and Act 5 of Wano. Number 3 is pretty similar to number 4, but this time it's the arrival of the Marines instead of the Big Mom Pirates. So we already know that the Marines have some connection to Wano and they're getting information from them, but we don't exactly know is why. It's been strongly implied that it has something to do with both Dr. Vegapunk and the harvesting of Sea Prism Stone. And besides this connection, we also know that Sword has infiltrated Wano, and with Drake now working with the Alliance, it's likely that he could have called in the rest of Sword to back him up. And if not Sword, he also could have contacted the Marines in general. But besides just Drake and Sword, CP0 could also enter the battle in chapter 1000. And finally, the top 2 most likely things to happen in chapter 1000 of One Piece. And the first is the death of the Scabbards. After chapter 997, it's more than likely that all of the Scabbards are dead or have at least been rendered unable to fight. We know this since Kaido was seen monologuing at the end of the chapter and flying Onigashima to the mainland of Wano without a single Scabbard in sight. This would mean that in chapter 1000, Luffy would finally reach the top, see Kaido, and just see all of the Scabbards lying on the floor defeated. But before I get into the number 1 most likely thing to happen, here's some honorable mentions, and they're all related to things going on outside of Wano. These could be things like whatever Blackbeard is doing, a full reveal of Green Bull, or even a reveal of what happened with Sabo and Vivi. The main reason why I put all these things as honorable mentions is because it's pretty unlikely that we would get an act break by chapter 1000. So this stuff about the outside world can't really be revealed just yet because Oda only does these chapters at the end of each act, and Act 3 will not be able to end by chapter 999. And with the honorable mentions out of the way, finally, the most likely thing to happen in chapter 1000, and that's the complete defeat of the Straw Hat Pirates and the end of Act 3 of Wano. There's a really popular fan theory that the raid on Onigashima will end in failure, and this is mainly because of how kabuki plays are normally structured in Japan and also just tendencies of Oda to add more pressure to the Straw Hats. And that's exactly what I think will happen in chapter 1000. Obviously the Straw Hats won't die here, but I mean we'll see a complete defeat that hasn't been seen since the Straw Hats' decimation on Saboti Archipelago. I don't think everyone will go up to Kaido and be defeated by him, but I think at least Luffy will get up there and get knocked out or at least heavily injured by Kaido, followed by panels of all of the Straw Hats losing their individual fights, not only giving them motivation but also adding more stakes to the final fight in the next act of Wano. And that's the top 5 things to happen in chapter 1000. But as always, that's just my take, so now I want to hear yours. Put what you think will happen in chapter 1000 in the comments, and to stay up to date with all of my videos, make sure to like and subscribe.